All right. We are talking to David Ellefson, bass player and founding member of the band Megadeth, Jackson artist. Welcome. How are you doing today, Dave?
Jackson. I am doing great, thank you. It's nice and sunny and clear here in Arizona, where I'm at in the United States. So good to be chatting with you.
Sounds good. Sounds better than the weather around here. So kind of throwback Wednesday question. So Megadeth was founded in 1983. Do you remember your first bass rig?
I do. It's funny. My very okay. So let me take a little walk through. In fact, you know what? I just for safety, I'm going to actually put my headphones in,
Right.
so we don't have any feedback or circling around of the audio.
So,
So my very first bass rig was my Gibson EBO bass that my mother bought me into a little Fender 112, and ironically did not sound anything like I thought it would, sounding like this. Yeah. And then from there, I bought a Gibson amplifier from a mail order company out of Fort Worth, Texas. And it was funny. It had a single 15. It was big. It was pretty tall. And the size of the amplifier was kind of like your size of your coolness, you know. So it had a single 15 and I think two 10s in it. But it had some sort of a power surge protector. So right as I would get up to the volume I needed, it would shut off, right?
oh,
So yeah, was not very effective. Then I got a Music Man 130 HD head, which was of course Leo Fender. After he sold Fender, he started Music Man. Always wanted a Music Man bass, could never afford one. I finally did get one.
yeah.
But I did get the amplifier. So it was a 212 with like kind of a reflex on the bottom.
Right.
And it was a 212 cabinet, and then the HD 130 head, and not loud enough. You know, again, I needed more speakers, you know, to
Yeah.
move the air. 212 inches, 24 inches of mass, not that much when you're playing with loud guitar players like I have my whole career. Then after that, I got it's funny.
So what kind of bass when you were starting out playing with the band? What kind of
Yeah.
bass rig was that?
Well, it's funny. So I'm leading up to this because it's sort of
Oh
this
yeah.
building block, right? So I went then, and I was always the guy in the band that had the PA system, right? So I had the PA. We rehearsed at my shed on the farm. And so I got a PA system, and that got me into. I noticed on Kiss Alive too. You know, Gene Simmons used the JBL. I think it was the 4530 cabinets, right, which were basically a PA cabinet. And in high school shop class, I actually built some 45. I think they're the 4560s, which are the scoop. I may have it wrong. Maybe those are the 4530s, but the single 15 with a scoop.
Yeah.
So I built 4 of those, and so when I went out to California at age 18, 1983, and started Megadeth, I basically took part of that PA system, and that was my bass rig with Megadeth. I used it to record "Killing Is My Business," P-Cells. It was these AB Systems brand amplifier,
Yeah.
an Ashley preamp. I was bi-amping. I did buy some Marshall 200-watt heads, and Marshall had a 215 cabinet, which was a
Yeah.
little bigger than 412. So I was trying to get all these different, you know, because we were trying to have sort of a Marshall backline. But Marshall, in my opinion, God bless them, they make a wonderful product, especially for guitar. Never quite got the bass thing right. You know, bass amp stuff. So I would always go back to, you know, basically this PA system that I had. And of course, the thing I found with that is that while it was loud and it had a lot of low end, and it was very transparent, you know, and I
Right.
realized that's why people use the SVTs and things like that, because it really punched right through the mid range. So
Right.
anyway, sorry for the long answer to such a short question.
No worries. I mean, it's a great and detailed answer. So if you compare what you used back then and what you're using now, do you think that at some point you just started like refining and evolving the sound, or are you kind of trying to emulate the sound that you had back in the old days because it was a great sound, kind of back to the roots?
Well, I think a real transition for me happened in 1987, 07
Yeah.
when I moved over to Harkey. The Harkey cabinets, they didn't make amplifiers at the time, but they just made the silver aluminum cone speakers. And I loved that attack. Of course, you know, around that time, Steve Harris from Iron Maiden had come out. Of course, Geddy Lee had a very prominent tone. But Steve really had an incredible clarity to his sound, and that really got through the Marshall guitars, because you know, keep in mind, even in Megadeth, you know, we're a very Marshall centric rhythm, you know, guitar sound, and that
Yeah.
eats up this mid range. So if you look at things sort of 20 hertz, our ears hear from 20 hertz up to 20K,
Right.
right? So what's in between there? Because that's really where you're trying to place your bass at. So if guitars are kind of hitting this heavy mid range, which they are with Marshall, I need to be down below that inside the kick drum.
Uh-huh.
And then I need to have this high end sort of clarity to the note, which is up above the guitars. And that's
Mhm.
kind of up, kind of almost where like, you know, snare drums and cymbals and those kind of things are. So that's really, if you kind of look on a frequency map, that's where my bass guitar tone sits. If you looked at it on a graphic EQ, they call it a California smile, where it's sort of like boosted bass,
Yeah.
scooped mids, boosted top, right? They call
Right.
that the California smile. So if you looked at it, so just kind of visually, that's what my tone looks like.
Yeah.
You know, so, and the Harkeys really helped accomplish that. They had a nice punch. And I just use 410s. I've used the 810s recently. Now I use the HD 410 high drives, which is a combination paper and aluminum speaker. You know, in Megadeth, I play songs like some of the older stuff, Trust, P-Cells. So the paper helps kind of retain that tone. But
Mm.
then when I get into the faster, thrashier stuff from So Far So Good So What and Rust in Peace, that stuff was all recorded with the aluminum cone. So,
Right.
you know, the high drive stuff from Harkey really helps give that clarity.
And are there any kind of other devices that you use in addition to the amplifiers to yeah, I mean, to cut through to that through that kind of dense to metal distorted guitars?
When I'm playing, no. Now there are a couple parts in the Megadeth set, for instance, Dawn Patrol, and then we've been segueing that also into a song called "Poison Was the Cure,"
Mhm.
and I will use a stereo chorus because it's just me and the drums at that point. And what I find is that when I'm playing with the band, I need the tone to be very pure and not affected at all.
Okay.
But when I have a solo feature point like that, I can use like say the chorus because it really widens the tone out and
Mhm.
it creates interest. It's a little bit of a different, it's a deviation of the tone. Um, so I will use it for that. You know, just recently I had the Ellefson Fallout pedal, and I just did a string of solo dates across the Midwest with my solo band. We're out promoting our album here, No
Oh, great.
Cover, which yeah, it's a collection of cover songs. So we were out just this last week doing that, and I tried, and that pedal's made by KHDK,
Uh-huh.
that company, and incredible. And I mostly use it a little bit for some distortion because it does add an interest, but never while I'm playing with the band. My tone is very clean when I'm with the band,
Okay.
but when I would hit it for like a little solo, like a, you know, I'd have these little like, you know, just a little, even a 1 or 2 measure, just feature bass break. I would punch the fallout pedal because it's like what guitar players do. They have what they call a lead boost, right? So when
Right.
they head into so they got a rhythm sound, and then when they go to a lead solo, they boost their sound to get up over the, rather than relying on the front of house sound man to mix that. It's easier if you can control that from the stage. So I'm kind of doing the same thing now. Is having that fallout pedal because it acts sort of as my own lead boost for little
Right.
bass features.
Right. Okay. So very, very clean and pure then.
Yeah.
Um, what's your take on the trend of recent years where a lot of bass players tend to work with these portable, lightweight amplifiers that you can pretty much put in your gig bag and then go to the
Yeah.
session room? Are you into these kind of things, or are they like, nah, not
Well,
my
it's
cup of
funny. I
tea?
remember being at a bass player live event in LA when I think Tech 21 rolled out, really one of the first ones, and it was very clever. It was very cool. Completely the wrong amplifier for what I do.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I was over in Germany at the Warwick Bass Camp
Right.
just a few years ago, and Jonas Hellberg was there, and we sat in a room, and I was plugging into their big 810, kind of their big amplifiers, and then I plugged into one of the little small ones, and he educated me on it. He said, he goes, that Class D power is totally the wrong type of power for what you need, and it's not meant to drive these big 810 cabinets.
No.
That's meant to be, I guess that's the Class A power, I think. So totally different power transformer. The circuit is designed to do an entirely different thing, and I think especially in the output section, where you're meant to, I look at it like you wouldn't put a little motorcycle engine inside of a big diesel truck, right?
No.
That's kind of the comparison I got. You know,
Yeah.
when you need to push the big weight, you want a big, powerful diesel engine in there, and that's what I need for the kind of bands that I play in and the music I play. For the smaller cabaret stuff, I think the smaller lightweight stuff is fantastic. That's always, you know, one of the it's a, if you want to play this instrument, there are some things you just have to deal with. Heavy, and it's usually very heavy.
Yeah, that's true.
You need to buy a bigger car, lift heavier stuff, and all the rest of
Yeah.
that. You know, the sound, you in my opinion, you can't get a big sound out of a feather.
That's true.
You know, it needs to come from a rock, not a feather.
Yeah.
And that's just me and my type of music I play, to get down heavy weighted with the drums down below the guitars. You know, and that doesn't apply to all music. You know, lots of you know, jazz fusion things, cabaret kind of stuff,
Mm.
church gigs. You can use those lighter cabinets. And I think for the guys that are kind of the gigging musicians who
Yeah.
are, you know, I play with some of those guys in church. Once in a while, I'll sit in and play in church as kind of my off the radar gig.
Yeah.
And those guys just, you know, they got done playing last night on Saturday after church. They're off to play another 1 or 2 gigs. And, you know, those kind of guys, you know, to be able to even just take a head and your gig bag and walk in and just plug that head into whatever cabinet that the
Yeah.
venue may have. Maybe it's an SWR, maybe it's a Fender, whatever it is. Just plug and play. I think the idea of it is great. It just doesn't apply to me.
I get that.
Yeah.
So you play pretty much exclusively with a pick. Has that always been the case, or was there a switch at some point? Maybe you started out playing with fingers, and at some point you were like,
Yep.
"Nah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna go this route."
Well, here's why. Okay, so yeah, good question, by the way. Yeah, I did. I learned how to play, you know, when I sat at home with my Mel Bay electric bass volume 1, you know, learning, you know, to play the scales, right? And learning the notes on the neck and all that stuff, right? I of course learned with my fingers. As I got into the real world of playing in bands, and I just talked about my amplifier, you know, legacy, right? When
Yeah.
I had these little amps and playing with guitar players who had 50 and 100-watt Marshall half stacks against big, loud, banging drummers, you know, I
Awesome.
couldn't hear myself. So I grabbed a pick, you know, and all of a sudden it was like, and I could dig in and get a percussive attack that allowed me to be heard. And that was why I picked up the plectrum, you know. It wasn't because I was trying to be like somebody else. It was literally a survival tactic.
Survival tactic.
And
Okay.
even then in as my teen years, I really got back into playing, because I played in jazz band in high school. I always go back and forth. You know, jazz band, you don't play with a pick, you play with fingers. If you're playing, you know, we do these swing band dances and stuff, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you put the pick down, you know. But then as I moved to LA, we started Megadeth. I was trying to be sort of a finger aficionado, but, you know, as we're playing, you know, like, you know, Devil's Island, you know, it looks impressive and people like, oh, you look so cool. To hell with looking cool. It's about, can you fricking play to a click track? Because if the click is here, right? And a lot of that is also a palm muting thing, where I've got the meat of my hand locking down, muting back here on the bridge
Right.
to control, you know, to control the note. You know, bass playing is about 3 things. Actually, all of music: what note you play, where you play it, and how long you play it. That's music. You could take all of music ever in the history of the world, and those 3 factors apply to all of it. Same with bass. What note are you playing? E, how long are you playing it? Short. And where you're placing it, right?
Right.
And in this case, I'm playing along with the guitar. I'm playing the riff. I'm not off creating some, adventurous bass line. I'm just locking into the riff because that's what the song calls for. So those three elements are always, what's required. And especially when you get in the studio and you start cutting records, pretty much 9 times out of 10, even today, when I walk into the pick and I plug in, people just go, I hit a note. They're like, that sounds great. Love that tone.
Yeah.
And then I'll play it I'll move to my fingers and they'll look at me and go, what'd you do? What happened? The tone changed. I go, oh, I switched over to my fingers. And they'll be like, yeah, don't do that. Put the pick on. The pick sounded better.
Yeah.
And it just sounds better. Recording engineers love clarity. Their job is to get things clean, clear, precise, so that it translates to the mix and to the final product. And the cleaner and clearer you can get a bass to tape, Pro Tools, if you will, is the big win. So for me, the plectrum, usually wins in most cases.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, okay, there are cases where you definitely go back to playing with your fingers because the situation requires it. But talking about picking techniques, do you have a special picking technique, or is there some kind of pick material that you prefer over others?
No, I mean, look, as far as pick material goes, I usually use these Jim Dunlop green Tortex. It's a gauge 0.88.
Right.
That serves most of my purposes. Occasionally I'll use this 1.0. And that's for a little bit heavier if I'm really ripping, if I'm really having to really kind of, it's a lot of ripping, thrashing stuff. Sometimes the thicker pick will hold up a little bit better. But for the most part, the 0.88 does everything for me. That's the right gauge. The Tortex doesn't slip out of my hand, whereas a plastic pick will. Plastic picks also break. The Tortex don't.
Mm-hmm.
So that's generally my generally my go-to pick. As far as techniques go, again, I think the main technique more than anything, and again, I just developed it as a survival technique, was this palm muting thing, where, there's the open note, but if you palm mute it, you know what I mean? It creates a musical dynamic. Music isn't just about the note you play, it's how you play it. So that it's, that it breathes or it's choked off, that's a big part of the the musical dynamic. So I find that by using that palm thing, in fact, I'll show you here. I mean, usually back here, I kind of control everything from right here. This arm here is just to finger the notes. I'm not really holding the bass here. I'm mostly holding the bass right here against my body. Even when I'm standing up, that's it. I could be a one-arm bandit, right? So this hand can just be the one fingering the notes. So really, 50% of how I play is right here in this hand, as much as we're always paying attention to this hand for the notes that we're playing.
With technique, I was also referring to, and it's good that you showed me that, because I could see it now. Some players just prefer a specific angle, when a down angle, or some like slightly bent to the side somehow, because they like this kind of attack, and it serves them better. And that's what I was wondering.
Well, yeah, no, exactly. And it's funny. So because of it, especially the Megadeth stuff, which is very progressive, it's very exact, it's very precise. I tend to have the bass very kind of squared off my body. I don't do this thing. Right. It's very skin. And I realize I'm sitting down, but even if I were standing up, I don't do the sort of Dee Dee Ramone punk rock thing,
No.
which is awesome. I mean, believe me, I'm a punk rock fan. And it's funny with that, because when you do kind of have the bass a little lower, you tend to kind of hack across the, and again, you're not doing what I do, which is anchoring. You're sort of like, kind of hacking across the string.
All over the
and even if you look at like Lemmy Kilmister, he was kind of more like, he was kind of like doing this kind of more like acoustic guitar shuffle across the, so again, and he was really more of a singer-songwriter. with the Megadeth stuff, my job is to really hunker down and get inside the guitar, get inside the kick drum, and really drive the pulse. So that requires a lot of control. So I'm buckled up pretty tight in the cockpit. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's if I'm pretty buckled in for
Yeah.
that type of playing.
You have been talking about basses. You've been a Jackson artist for 3 decades now. That's not something that you'll see very often. I mean, there are guys out there that jump to a new kind of endorsement contract within every 2 years. How did your relationship with Jackson originally start, and how did it evolve over the years?
What's funny, in 1987, me and Dave and Chris Poland, we went down to go see Judas Priest at the Sports Arena in LA, and that would have been on their the Turbo tour.
Yeah.
And Jeff and Dokken was opening for him, and Jeff Pilson was playing either a Jackson or a Charvel bass
Yeah.
with a pick through some SVTs, and had this incredibly great, clear tone. And so the next day I went to the Guitar Center on Sunset Boulevard, and I saw a Jackson bass hanging on the wall. I pulled it down. I plugged it into a Gallion-Kruger 800 RB
Hmm.
into a stack of Harkey cabinets. I think it was a single 15 and some 410s. And that day, my new tone was born. I mean, that was it right there. So I immediately set out to get the Gallion-Kruger 800 RBs and the Harkey cabs. Dave and I drove out to East LA to where Grover Jackson, who owned the company at that time,
Yeah.
where his facility was, and we sat down with Grover, and he made Dave a Flying V, and he made me my silver bass. It's funny, actually. This is now the new signature bass.
Right.
Just came out, and this really is this is kind of the origin story, if you will, of my back to the beginning of me with Grover. And it's a replica of that first bass that Grover made for me back in 1987. And they just sounded great. They played great. I couldn't wait to pick the instrument up and play it. It gave me great pleasure. And I think that's a big part of it, And I leave guitars out in my house because when I see them, I want to walk over and pick them up and play them. I don't
Right.
put things away in the case. It's just one more step to have to get the thing out, So, part of it is it looks cool. It feels great in my hand. I love the tone that it makes. It sat great in the mix with Megadeth. And then this bass, it's funny, this 5-string that I'm playing, this is now the reissued signature model of this, because when we did the Rust in Peace record, there's a song on there called Hangar 18, and it's down in this low octave of D.
Right.
And I recorded it on the 4-string with a drop tuning, pre-Alice in Chains, mind you, before drop tuning was cool, right? And then I tuned up to finish the song, but then I called Jackson, went, oh my God, I got to get a 5-string to go out on tour and play this for the Rust in Peace tour. So that's where I invented this bass, so that's kind of how things went with Jackson. As I had needs inside of Megadeth, I'd call Jackson and we'd invent a new instrument, and that's still what I did last decade. That's what I've done. The Kelly Bird, we've updated the look of the 5-strings, and we've now gone back to the beginning again, back to 1987 and 1990. We're rolling out reissued versions of these instruments that really, they defined me and Megadeth. They defined kind of the look and sound of thrash metal bass playing, and also obviously a great nod to the history of Jackson guitars and a lot of the innovation that we've done together over the years.
So, so how has it been working with their R&D department? Did you always know right away what you wanted, or was it some kind of a fourth and back? They did your prototype, and then you made marks, notes.
No, I knew what I wanted. I call them up and I say, hey, let's, like I said, with, again, I want this 4-string. Grover built it. And then, 2 years later, 3 years later, I called him up, said, oh, I need a 5-string. I want the neck to be kind of narrow. I don't want, because at the time, most of the 5-strings were things like Tobias, and Music Man had one, but the tones were wrong. They didn't sit at all in the domain of what I needed for Megadeth. So I figured, look, let's just take Jackson. We know the Jackson sound works. I want the neck to be narrow because I'm thrashing and ripping Holy Wars and, all this fast stuff. I don't want a fat, wide 5-string. And then more recently, I guess, we came out with the Kelly Bird. I said, hey, I wanted like a cool bitchin' looking rock and roll bass that I can sling a
Right.
little lower, play it for the encore. And I said, I always like a Gibson Thunderbird, but let's make it with the Jacksonisms. We kept the Jackson headstock. Inside of Jackson, they have the Kelly guitar, Kelly
Right.
Rhodes, Randy Rhodes' brother. So we added that Kelly Bird, that Kelly horn on the bottom. So we made it our own. And so those are the kind of things that and the import instruments are phenomenal. These are imports, and they're great. They're neck throughs. I have some other bolt-on neck throughs that, I mean, they sound dead to nuts like a Fender P bass. I walk into any studio, just plug those things in, and the engineer is happy. They're going, that sounds freaking great. So,
Right.
these are instruments that not only work well for me and my Megadeth application, but they're things that work really well for anybody on, again, Sunday morning church gig to plugging into a high dollar recording session. I want these things to be very versatile and work for everybody in any situation.
And I want to see a Kelly Bird in a church. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Um,
Well,
maybe. Huh?
to that end, it's funny. We rolled these out, which was a very traditional looking
Oh
bass.
yeah.
Even has this Jackson. Sorry, I got bases falling all over the Jackson headstock, which is a unique IP, intellectual property, that they own.
Yeah.
So it's great that bass. It's funny, we did a 4 and a 5 string in a white and a black, and that actually got best in show. I think it won the award for best new bass last year at NAMM. And those things, and again, because people, it's kind of one of those things where it's like not everybody wants the pointy headstock.
Right.
Maybe the church guy, right? Not
Yeah,
everybody.
exactly.
Or if you're playing a country gig or you're doing something like this, isn't the right look,
Maybe not.
because you need to walk in and make your band leader happy. Let's face it, we listen with our eyes. The look of an instrument is just as important as the tone and the feel and the sound. It's part of the gig.
It's true.
Like you say, you don't walk into the to the funk gig with your 6 string, but you can walk into the fusion gig with your 6 string bass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So just kind of knowing the right application. So what I tried to do with Jackson this last decade is have something that works for everybody. We've got the Thrasher basses, we got the Kelly Bird rocker basses, we've got these more traditional looking playing kind of bass, bolt-on type stuff, and this way we've got something for everybody. And I think we've got, now moving forward now in this new decade, we've got another nice look for the product line. Really, really cool stuff coming out. So I feel like Jackson started Jackson used to be a kick-ass guitar company. Oh, by the way, we have a bass. To
Yeah.
now, Jackson is a real bass company.
Right.
We've got a real, strong product line of a lot of different offerings, and something for everybody. And I'm very proud of that. So the last decade with Jackson has been very fruitful, very productive. And come on over and play a Jackson. I think you'll be surprised and be happy with what we have.
I definitely think so. Before we wrap this up, what are your plans music-wise in the coming month? I mean, obviously it's a tough situation right now with the whole
Yeah.
Corona thing going on, but yeah, tell us.
Honestly, it's been one of my most productive and musically satisfying years I've ever had. And I
Wow.
think maybe part of that is because I've been forced to be home. So, you kind of, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
I just put out, of course, this Ellefson No Cover record on Ear Music.
Right.
And that's a collection of covers with a whole bunch of my friends. It's kind of the ultimate pandemic quarantine record. It's 18, 19 songs of some great stuff. I have another Ellefson solo album that I'm finishing up now. Probably have that done early in the new year, ready to come out probably in 2021. I just did a record with Mike Heller of Fear Factory and Vin Dombrowski of Sponge.
Okay.
A new thing that we have called Lucid.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be ready to come out at some point. I don't know that that'll even come out next year. Of course, the big thing is we got a new Megadeth record coming out. It's my parts have been recorded. We're just finishing the overdubs on it. So we've got a big world tour, of course, set up around that. So you know, that anchors things, you know, and as you know, Megadeth has had to shift, of course, around the pandemic, and you know, readjust its touring schedule, and of course, it's, you know, the release of the new album. I'm happy that I've got some of these other things that I can sort of pop in as adjustments need to be made, and I think that's kind of the world we live in right now, is just to be armed and ready, be flexible, and you know, don't sit and wait for the world to tell you what to do. You know,
No.
it's like, just take what's coming down the pike, pick up your instrument, start writing some tunes, get busy with your buddies, and start and keep making music, man. That's the thing that I think is getting a lot of us through this thing.
Some amazing closing words. David, thanks for carving out the time to talk to us. We wish you all the best for the musical projects, and hope to see you very soon.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Right.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.